As you know, this is a meeting every year that gives an opportunity for the states in the ADP network to come together to reflect on lessons from progress and successes to date, to identify and prepare to meet the next challenges that you will face as you work on this college and career-ready agenda. One of the reasons that these meetings have been so successful is that they provide a regular opportunity for us to have conversations with each other. We're going to begin that conversation this morning. I'm going to make a few remarks to kind of kick off the discussion and set a stage. But during this session this morning, we're going to be engaging you in discussion about where we stand at this moment in time on the college and career-ready agenda. Where are we? What's coming next? What do we need to worry about? What do we need to do next? You should be thinking about that now, not that you haven't been thinking about it day in and day out, but that's the conversation that we'd like to begin this morning, and it will carry through for the rest of the meeting. Let me first give you an idea of who's here. We have 36 states represented at this meeting. We have 11 chief state school officers. We have 2 governors, although actually one governor is delayed and I think will not be here due to weather issues in New England. We have 10 representatives of governors' offices, governors, education policy advisors, and secretaries of education. We have 38 higher education leaders here. We have 9 state board members, 5 legislators, 62 people from state education agencies at the K-12 level, 9 business leaders from states around the country, 8 people from various P20 organizations, and 13 of you from local foundations, local advocacy organizations and the like, and 1 U.S. Secretary of Education. So there is only one at a time. So we have, a very interesting mix of people who share an agenda in common, who are working very hard in your own states to try to make progress on this agenda. And this is, again, an opportunity to consider the successes that you've had and to consider the challenges ahead. So let me begin that conversation with you, if I can, just to sort of set out a few remarks, set out some perspective about where we are and where we're going, but then ask you to share your views on that with each other and to begin the conversation that we will have together over the next day and a half. There have been tremendous successes and incredible progress on this college and career-ready agenda, and frankly, it's because of the states in this room and the people in this room that has happened. Today, college and career readiness is a national priority, increasingly embraced by parents and the public, by the K-12 education community, by the higher education community, by the philanthropic community, by the business community, by the media, and by the federal government. 5 years ago, when the ADP network started, this idea was a bit of a pipe dream, the idea that the mission of public education should be to prepare all youngsters for post-secondary success, whether it was in post-secondary education training programs and careers. Only a handful of other organizations shared this idea. A dozen states came together to explore what it meant and whether it could be possible. And there were really only a few folks who thought that this was either an essential effort or a feasible effort. Today, we've had a tremendous increase in the number of states that have adopted core college and career-ready graduation requirements. There were 2 when we started. There are 21 now that have done that. A growing number of states that have adopted academic standards that reflect college and career readiness in mathematics and English. Before the Common Core work started, there were 31 states that adopted college and career-ready standards, and they were all in the ADP network, just about. And then we had the Common Core effort that has increased that number. Recent polling by Achieve that you will hear about later today shows that there is tremendous public support, bipartisan public support, for the college and career-ready agenda. Nobody doubts that it's essential for young people to be prepared for post-secondary success in the ways that this group has been talking about. The result of all of this progress, I think, is a key step toward overhauling the mission of public education in this country to align it with the realities of a 21st century global knowledge-based economy and a diverse society. That's a big step, and it's happened because of the work that you all have been doing over the years. Secondly, common state standards are a reality, and the work to begin common state assessments will begin momentarily, I think. In 2008, Achieve released a report called Out of Many, One, which showed that 16 of the states in this room at that point in time had adopted college and career-ready standards that had a common core of expectations, and that word was chosen quite deliberately, common core of expectations across the states that were well aligned with the ADP benchmarks. That provided the existence proof that a state-led effort to create common standards was in fact possible, and it provided a good part of the intellectual underpinnings for that effort. Last year at this time, at this meeting, we had a session on common standards. That work was really just getting underway. The draft of the Anchor College and Career Ready Standards was being finalized. The K-12 work was just getting started. It took a little bit longer than people anticipated, those of us involved in it, and just a few more drafts than anyone thought it was going to take. But it also took and generated an awful lot of involvement by all of the states, or nearly all of the states. It took and generated significant federal incentives. It generated an enormous amount of involvement of both the K-12 and higher education community in the work of drafting and redrafting and reviewing and revising and commenting on the standards. Today, 36 states and the District of Columbia have adopted Common Core standards. Nobody thought that we would be at this place a year ago, but we are. And I know as I look around the room, as I think about conversations I've had with many of you in states where it was a struggle to do this, that it took remarkable partnerships in every state to make this happen. It took commitment, it took will, it took vision, and it took just rolling up your sleeves and doing hard work to persuade people that this was the right thing to do. And as a result, we're in a very, very different place than we were a year ago. Today, two groups of states have come together to build on the Common Core standards and to develop plans for to create plans and proposals for developing common assessments anchored in those standards. All but a handful of states are participating in one or another of these consortia, and a number of you are participating in both. The plans of these two consortia are somewhat different. They won't develop the same assessment system at the end of the day. I think there will be meaningful differences between them, but they share a number of things in common. They are working to develop assessments that are significantly different than the state assessments that exist now. They will be more rigorous. They will engage students in more meaningful demonstrations of their knowledge and understanding than traditional tests typically do. They'll better reflect the kinds of quality classroom instructional practices that we expect of all teachers, and they'll be necessary to help students meet the standards. They will be internationally benchmarked and enable us in ways to compare the performance of students in your states to students around the world. And they will allow comparisons across states, certainly within the consortia, and I think there's a commitment in the two consortia to find a way to create and allow for comparisons across the states. Together, these developments should be and can be game-changing. For the first time, we'll have a uniform set of expectations across states and districts that are grounded in the realities of what students need for post-secondary success, expectations that will be determined by the real-world demands that they will face, not by the zip code of where they live or the boundaries of the state in which they live. We should have performance standards that should provide students, parents, and teachers with honest, accurate, and comparable information about whether students are well prepared for the next step in their learning pathway. For the first time, being proficient should mean being prepared. And I think we know from experiences in states that have already moved in this direction that the immediate implication of that will be that students will look a whole lot less well prepared the day after those results come out than they did the previous year when results from different assessments come out. So we will have challenges to face as we deal with those issues. Another part of the game-changing dynamic that's at work, I think, we now have a growing track record of collaboration across states that should lead to the development of other solutions, whether it's curriculum or instructional materials, teacher and protocols for evaluating teachers and school leaders, technology platforms, and the like. We should have a way to develop those things that are better, cheaper, and faster than what states can produce on their own. Better because they will draw on the best experience across states and the best intellectual resources in the country to create them. Cheaper, they'll be less costly and more efficient to develop, drawing on shared resources rather than resources that are spent separately 50 times over to develop the same or nearly the same thing. And they'll be able to be developed and able to go to scale more rapidly than would be the case if each state did this kind of work on its own. Those are game-changing potentials. And they can change the game that matters the most, not how we teach, not how we organize our schools, not what our standards are. The game that can help change that matters the most is creating an education system that no longer produces ill-prepared students, ill-prepared high school graduates, large numbers of dropouts, and substantial and persistent achievement gaps. We can change that game. I think the work that has gone on so far has demonstrated the feasibility of doing that. The question that I'd like to spend some time discussing with you this morning, or hearing you discuss more accurately, is what's the work ahead given the platform and the foundation that we've built together. It's taken strong leadership, hard work, and a commitment to collaboration to get this far. The states and you individuals in this room have really provided the spark and the leadership to get us where we stand today. And your leadership, your energy, and your commitment are going to be needed even more as we go forward. Because we've been here before, notwithstanding the progress that we've made. This is not the first time that we've had, in a sense, new national goals and a new national commitment, better standards, better initiatives, initiatives for better assessments and accountability. We've been down this road before, but it hasn't really been translated on a large scale into deep and lasting change in our schools and classrooms, better preparation for our students, or increased post-secondary success for them. So we are at a moment in time which is on the one hand unique, given how we got here and given the tremendous collaboration across states. But on the other hand, this is not unique at all. We know what has to come next. We know that we've had a very hard time doing it in the past. The question is, can we pull it off this time? How will we ensure that it works out differently this time? How are we going to sustain support for this readiness agenda over the long haul? And more immediately through the leadership changes that are going to occur in so many states this fall. How are we going to keep this going? I read an article in yesterday's New York Times. I meant to bring it with me, but didn't. But the gist of it was that there have been some incredible breakthroughs in microchip technology that look like in a very short time, over the next 3 to 5 years, the technology world would be able to produce microchips, little teeny tiny chips that will, for example, one of the points they made was hold about 1,000 movies on a small chip and enhance the computing power of small devices dramatically more than has been the case in the past. And the article went on to point out that there's been Moore's law in education, in technology, that every 18 months or so, the power of computing devices doubles. And that's been going on for quite some time. And there was concern in the scientific community that law might not hold anymore. But now hope and progress that change can continue at that pace going into the future. And as I read that, I thought, well, we don't have Moore's law in education. We don't make those kinds of changes very rapidly. We make them incrementally, perhaps at best. And we don't have a lot of time and a lot of patience to continue at that pace. So we have several demands. One is to escalate the pace of change. How are we going to do that? How are we going to do that on a large scale? And the second is recognizing that we're not in the chip manufacturing business. We're not going to make changes nearly that rapidly. How are we going to sustain support for this work over the longer haul that it's going to take? Those are big challenges. How do we make sure that better preparation for post-secondary education results in greater success in getting students through post-secondary education? College readiness, after all, is not the end game, not for students, not for our society. The real returns occur through increased post-secondary degree completion. And we're not there yet by any stretch of the imagination. What changes are going to be necessary in our post-secondary education systems, and what new partnerships between K-12 and higher education will be needed in order to increase success all the way through the pipeline? That challenge lies ahead of us. How do we make sure that more rigorous standards for students lead to different and more rigorous work that students and teachers do together? The Common Core standards build on the best state and international standards, but they're different. They're not really more of the same. They call for a much deeper learning and understanding. They call on students to be able to apply what they've learned in different ways. As you'll hear tomorrow, they call for a different kind of writing, the ability to read and comprehend different kinds of text, more informational text in particular. In mathematics, they call for much greater attention to applications and modeling than has ever been the case before. This is not more of the same. How do we change, how do we help teachers change the work that they do with students in the classroom so that students develop the kind of engagement and understanding that is going to be needed? How are we going to translate the demands for increased accountability, particularly for teachers, in ways that will support the kind of changes in instruction that are needed? You know, as I said before, we've been down this road before. We have, since really the late 1980s and early 1990s, moved towards a system of standards assessment and accountability where every 5 or 6 years ago or so, when we don't get the changes we need, we tighten the screws on accountability a little bit more, hoping that finally those people will get the message and shape up. And that has led, in some cases, to significant improvements in instruction and achievement. There's no doubt about that. But it has also led, in other cases, to simply more drill and kill, more test prep over a longer period of time to try to help students perform well on tests, even if they didn't quite master the material that those tests were supposed to measure. How are we going to make sure we don't get that second pathway chosen very often, particularly in an era when we are going to be increasing the demands, we're going to be responding to increased demands for holding teachers accountable for the results that they produce? How are we going to manage our way through this? How are you going to lead your way through this so that it produces the kinds of changes in classrooms that are necessary? Finally, just to sort of give us a few more things to think about, how are we going to make sure that the federal government is actually a supportive partner in this effort? How are we going to make sure that the legislative changes that are coming down the road at some point are actually supporting the state work on this agenda? Those are just a few of the issues that I think are probably on your minds, that we've been hearing from you over the course of our work with you, and that we think will animate the discussion here today. And what I'd like to do is just take a minute or two to see if there are any of you who've got any comments or observations or thoughts on these issues before we make a transition to the next session. So if anyone's got some conversation you want to begin, a marker you want to lay down for the discussions as they proceed, we have mics available and we're ready to hear from you. Anybody? Want to think a bit? Paolo.
I just wanted to add, because I think you have a great list of challenges. Looking ahead, I think the fiscal realities that the states are going to be facing, and perhaps even the federal government's inability to maybe be as generous, shall we say, as they have been in the past. I think we all have to work collectively to ensure that that's not a barrier to continuing this work, and that we can still do it and move forward, even though we're all going to be feeling some of the squeeze on the fiscal.
I think that's a really good point, Paolo, and I think we're probably going to have to learn how to do more with less. I mean, it's trite to say, but it's not like the economy is going to turn around anytime in the near future with lots of more money at any level of government to be allocated to this agenda. So this is a different kind of game changer, but it's clearly out there. I'm glad you brought that up. Anyone else? Is there someone there? Yeah.
You mentioned a lot of partnerships, but what about teachers' unions?
Well, their partnership is certainly going to be needed. I know we actually had a very interesting conversation in the governing board of the assessment consortia that PARC, that Achieve is involved in yesterday, where a fair amount of time was spent talking about the intersection of new developments in assessment and the new demands for teacher evaluation. And I think that is one of the places where unions are going to be make or break on this. We did not come up with a solution to that, but I think we recognize that that's going to be a challenge ahead. I will tell you that tomorrow morning, when we have a session on the implementation of the Common Core standards, Randy Weingarten, the president of AFT, will be here. So you might listen and see if there's a question or two you want to ask her about that. Others. Keep thinking about these issues as the day and the next day and a half go on. Is there another question here?
Yes, I'd like to respond to the last comment. I think there are union partnerships going on. I am the vice president of our state union, and we work very closely in Wisconsin with our Department of Education on all of our education initiatives. But the department reaches out to us as much as we reach out to them. It has to be a two-way street. How many of you reached out to your union and invited them to be part of a team to work on this? Or part of your family school community teams, or part of your P21 teams, and I could go on and on and on, where we are always reached out to, and we reach out to the state, and we work together in our state.
Thank you for that. Others? Okay, well, you know what? Let's transition to the next session. We've got a big agenda ahead of us. Let me just take a minute to give you an idea briefly of what's coming up, because the issues that I listed this morning are things that we will be attending to over the course of this conference. So immediately following this session, you'll stay right here. We have another plenary session on aligning the college readiness and college completion agendas, and I'll come back to that in a second. We then go to breakout sessions that are all focused on the college and career readiness agenda in one way or another. You will hear in one session about a recent poll that Achieved did on public views on college and career readiness. You'll hear in another session, you'll have an opportunity to talk to people from states who are working very hard on the delivery and execution of the college and career readiness agenda in their state. If you remember, I think it was last year that Michael Barber came and talked about deliverology. Now we're seeing some experiences in states working on that. You'll have an opportunity in another session to pick up on the standards work and to learn about work that's underway now to develop next generation science standards and ways that you might be able to participate in that. And we have another breakout session that will focus on using data systems to advance the college and career ready agenda. After lunch, we have a session that I think you'll find particularly interesting back here in this room, Sustaining College and Career Ready Policies Through the 2010 Election. We have 3 Achieve board members scheduled for that. Governor Bredesen from Tennessee, Governor Carcieri, who was scheduled but is unable to make it, would have been part of this, but it would have been an opportunity to hear 2 governors talk about how they see sustaining the agenda in their state over time. And then Mark Greer, the vice chairman of Prudential Financial, also Achieve board member, will participate in that session and talk about how business can contribute to sustaining the agenda. And you'll have an opportunity to interact on a number of issues in that session. There'll be state team time, and then, I'm having a hard time following this, we will have a session on STEM initiatives that will look at how that work is fitting into the college and career ready agenda. And then finally, a session today on creating a college-going culture and supportive environment that will look at what it takes to make this all work in schools. Tomorrow, the day is going to be devoted primarily to implementation of Common Core standards issues. There'll be an opportunity at breakfast to have a conversation with the key people who wrote the standards, getting their insights into what is critical and different and important about the standards and their thoughts as they develop the standards on what implementation challenges will be ahead. We have another session that will follow that immediately with 4 panelists from a local district, a state, a foundation perspective, and who's our 4th one? And Randy Weingarten from the AFT, looking at what's it going to take at the state and local and school level to implement the Common Core standards, and I think you'll find that a particularly interesting session. That will be followed immediately by a keynote address from Secretary Duncan. As you know, he He is joining us tomorrow. He has indicated that he will be talking about some critical issues and priorities around assessment and race to the top, and we think we'll have some interesting news from him tomorrow. And then we will have a set of breakout sessions on implementing the Common Core. So again, the morning and the day will be focused on Common Core implementation. It will conclude after lunch with a session on ESCA reauthorization. How are we going to get the federal government in the right place on these issues? So I think there are a lot of issues that we've highlighted this morning that will run throughout the next day and a half. I think there'll be lots to learn and lots to do in all of those sessions. And so without further ado, we're going to get started on the immediate next session.